Well, here's something a little different for this channel. A friend of mine recently inherited a 1923 Studebaker that had been in his family for over 70 years. I'll admit that I had to Google the car even to know what it looked like. My friend's grandfather owned a Studebaker dealership for many years, and this was one of his personal cars in a small collection. The Studebaker Brothers Manufacturing Company was founded in 1852 and originally built things like wagons, buggies, carriages, and harnesses. And these are all during the time of what is truly horsepower. The Studebaker Company entered the automobile business in 1902 and continued producing automobiles all the way up to 1966. These cars were somewhat upmarket and were even popular as police cars, I learned, due to their reputation of being well-made, powerful, and durable. This particular car was transferred straight to my house as I agreed to look it over and provide an honest assessment of the condition and the prognosis. It hasn't run for several decades, so just the simple job of getting it into my garage was a challenge because I have a little bit of an uphill slope and the car has plenty of rolling resistance. With the help of my wife, we're able to get the car into the garage as the sun was going down. My very first objective is to get the car on my lift and start to learn what I've gotten myself into. Well, let's take a closer look at this. The story I know is it hasn't run in 20 years. It spent a lot of its life garage, but it did spend, I think, several decades outside. So I've not done anything to it yet. All I've done is winch it. It was brought here on a trailer. I winched it into the garage and I put it on the lift. That's it. So we're going to go through this together. What I'm amazed about this vehicle is how original it is. You know, when I first saw it, my first reaction was, oh, I need to clean that up. I'm going to power wash it. And no, I'm going to pump the brakes on that because this patina is very attractive and it's so original. I don't want to get carried away. I'm going to clean the glass. I'll probably vacuum it out, but I'm going to not focus on cosmetics. I'm going to first get it running, get the mechanicals in good shape. So let's do a real quick walk around just to see some of the details of this car. First off, I love the headlights. Headlights are awesome. I haven't even tried to turn them on or anything, but it's all sheet metal. There are a lot of wood parts. That running board and the floors are actually wood, and that's original. We'll open up the hood in a little bit. But these are true wood spoke wheels. And what an amazing choice. But that was common for the time. Inside we've got leather seats. Don't know anything about history of these, if that's original or not, but they're in great shape. I mean, once they get cleaned up, they will be beautiful. Really nice condition in there. The top, obviously, something's happened. I think maybe, I haven't asked any questions, but maybe when it sat outside, I don't know, maybe a tree fell on it or something. But, you know, this strut is broken, and there's another 2 or 3 that are broken, but they can all be fixed. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. It's a 3-speed manual transmission, and the only thing I can see that's not original, you know, this is obviously an aftermarket turn signal, and this is a mirror off of some modern car. But other than that, I found a relatively modern fuel filter, and a relatively modern coil, ignition coil. So otherwise, it just has rear brakes only. Manual rear brakes, but otherwise it's original, and that's really cool. So let's open up the engine and see what's going on. The way you do this is you pull these retainers out to open the hood. So it's a 6-cylinder L head gasoline engine, and like I said, the only thing I can find that seems not original is this coil that's literally duct taped to the original coil and that looks like a relatively maybe less than 50 years old coil. Other than that, this is all just original. This is a 1-barrel Stromberg carburetor, and you've got that configuration where the intake and the exhaust is both on the same side of the engine. Like I said, straight 6. The head is just a cast iron head, no moving parts. The valves are in the block, and the head has obviously been welded a few times where there have been some cracks from probably just heat, and they've been re-welded, and that's not wrong. I remember I had to do that on that Willys Jeep that I restored. It could hold for decades like that. So of course I want to get it started. I'm not just going to start cranking, so I don't know what's going on in the cylinders, if there's rust, if there is water, none of that. So before I just start cranking, I'm going to pull the spark plugs, and I'll use my bore scope to get down in the cylinder and look around in each cylinder and just make sure everything's okay in there, because I could do collateral damage by just recklessly starting to crank. At least when I look in the radiator, I don't see any water, but you can only see down about that far. So I will also explore if it's watertight. I mean, this thing could have a cracked block. It could have, I just don't know. The owners did not know. So I'll find out all of this, and I'll document it as we go along. But what a cool car. 40 horsepower, by the way. So I've looked at all of the cylinders and pistons, and nothing catastrophic that I can see so far. Yeah, there's not water in there. There are not any missing pieces of the pistons. I do see some surface rust on the cylinder walls here and there. So I don't see anything right now that would make me not want to crank this. I mean, it could be before it's over, that head is off, and if there's a blown head gasket or something. But again, I haven't heard any of that, so it may not be the case. Oh, and the spark plugs really do, a spark plug is a great way to check the health of an engine, and they all look pretty consistent with this. If that shows up, let me see if that shows up on the camera. It's not focusing. So they all just look rich. That's probably the nature of cars from this time. But they're all equal like this. They're not damaged. There's just a lot of carbon, hydrocarbons. So same with the top of the pistons, just carbon buildup. And I know that's the case for older cars. Very common situations. So I don't really see any issues with going ahead and trying to start this. Off camera, I was able to turn the motor over 360 degrees without any mechanical interference. So I'm going to put the plugs back and devise a temporary fuel system and see if we've got spark and try to make this thing fire off. So I cleaned all the spark plugs with a wire wheel and put them all back, reattached the spark plug wires. So I'm getting close to trying to start it, but let's do an inventory. So it's got a conventional distributor, it's a straight 6-cylinder. Conventional distributor. It does have a spark advance that's manually with linkage, with mechanical linkage. This spark advance is adjusted from inside the driver's area. Here's a 6-cylinder with the flat head. You've got exhaust manifold here. This is the intake manifold. Carburetor is down here. It's an updraft. carburetor. I think it's a Stromberg. This is I don't know if it's original, but it's a very historic and dated coil. It must not have worked. This is the coil that I'm going to rely on. It's where you add oil to the engine. Like I said, here's the carburetor. I don't know if you can see that. That's that butterfly valve. That's the choke. So that choke is closed and opened with just an old-fashioned pull mechanical thing. Throttle linkage here, right? That's also mechanical on the steering wheel. And so I've rigged up a temporary fuel tank. I don't know what's in that tank in the back. I haven't gone in there and looked at it. It's at least 20 years old. I don't want to risk bringing bad fuel up to the engine. So this is my temporary fuel. Then I've got a hose that goes down and connects to this line. This is the original line that comes from the tank that comes up here and goes through this fuel filter. I just unhooked it right there and connected to this little guy. And this copper line goes up to the bowl, to the carburetor bowl, which is back there. I've actually taken that cover off and verified it is dry and there's a float and a needle and seat. So that bowl, I've blown it out with compressed air. It looks clean enough. So it looks like when I get fuel here, it'll be just gravity fed to that bowl, which will then be picked up by the carburetor, assuming the jets are open. So that's the idea here. And I verified that it has oil. It doesn't have a dipstick. It's got a float thing over here that you probably can't see on camera, but I verified that it has oil and coolant. So then I needed to get electricity to the coil to get spark. So I haven't figured out the dash, and the key is not a conventional modern situation. I don't know how to turn on the ignition, and instead of spending all my time on Google, I decided just to bring 6 volts directly from the battery over to the coil. So before I finish talking about the ignition, let me do an inventory on this side. So this is the other side of the engine. There's an electrical distribution bus here, very simple, but I went in and just kind of checked for any problems and cleaned some contacts. And I continued to go around and clean all contacts. This is the generator. So I took all these contacts off and wire brushed them here at the starter, and used dielectric grease and put it all back together. So all these electrical contacts are in good shape. This is the starter, and it's got a gear reduction pair here, and it's, look at this, chain driven to go to the crank. And generator, coolant hoses, and there's the cylinders again. So it's a 6-volt system with a positive ground. So I went into the battery is in the under the passenger floor, under the passenger feet, and so I just took a wire. This happens to be some speaker wire, and I just doubled it and used it for just the purpose of this ignition. Ran this to the battery, to the negative terminal of the battery, and then I'm going to route this over. So this is an open circuit, 12 volts. If I touch this to the ground, it would spark, right? So I carry this over here, and this I'll connect to the coil right there, and then I'm going to attempt to crank it. And I have tested the starter when the spark plugs were out. I did get the start. I cleaned all the connections on the starter button. It's a button you hit with your foot. It's on the floor of the interior, just like an old high beam switch. It's a high current connection. So I did verify that the starter will turn over, but this will be the first time that I've tried to start it actually through combustion. encouraging that it finally did start, and it looks like all 6 cylinders are contributing. This thing I was using is one of those laser guided temperature probes. So if I aim this at something and pull the trigger, it'll tell you what temperature that location is, whether it's your hand or the wall. So I used this and detected that all 6 cylinders were getting hot, getting equally hot in a good way. And that means there was combustion taking place in those cylinders. So it looks like everything's there. The pistons, the valves, the camshaft, it looks like everything's working as it should. Now that doesn't mean that this is ready to go to the to Starbucks and pose for pictures. There's a lot more to think about with this vehicle as far as leaks and if it's got good compression or if the carburetor needs work. So there's plenty. I haven't even thought about brakes or transmission, but the point is, at this point, I can say the engine in general is a functional engine. So then it just becomes nuance about those little items like tuning and overheating or whatever old cars like to do. So anyway, good success story to this point. I'll do a little bit more. Before I turn this back to the owners, I'll verify that the transmission works and the brakes. That's probably what I'll do next before I let them know that it's got a decent bill of health, and I'll get it back to them sometime in the next month or so.